All right, peeps. On today's episode of the Kung Fu Genius, I'm going to be interviewing my good friend Sifu Vik Hothi about his new book, The Doctrine of Wing Chun Kuen. Lots of gems, lots of cool poses, and lots of super secret videos. Just scan the QR code. Let's get to it.
And every day, I practice martial arts. Watch out!
Sifu Vik, welcome back to the Kung Fu Genius podcast. Cool to have you here. It's been a while. Certainly wasn't just a few minutes ago. So I have you back for another topic. Last time we talked a little bit about history, in particular the whole Snake and Crane Wing Chun stuff. And now I want to talk about something that's much more in my wheelhouse and much more interesting for me, which is one, your new book, which is awesome, by the way, Doctrine of Wing Chun Kuen, and it's quite a beefy book. It's not one of those pamphlets. It's a well-researched, well-written, and well-constructed book. And talk a little bit about your training, your takes on Wing Chun, where you think Wing Chun is heading, what types of training you think would be beneficial for those who do practice Wing Chun. But before we get started, maybe you can give my audience a little bit of a basic background as to how you came to Wing Chun, what kind of Wing Chun you had done, what your background is.
Okay. So I started martial arts in 97, I think, something like this. Typical, father saw the Karate Kid, you're doing that the next day, off to the local karate club. Super hardcore, old school style, concrete floor, getting kicked in your stomach as you're doing push-ups, all of that stuff. Really, really, in retrospect, loved it at the time. Cried the whole time while I'm there, but it really set the stage for how I believe martial arts, should have been taught from there. It was an old school, full contact to the body and everything. So, it was cool. So ended up doing, relatively well at that. I was competing. I got my black belt in the karate. And then I thought, okay, all my friends are doing taekwondo. And I thought, right, let's do some of that. So into taekwondo went, same kind of thing. Ended up competing, was part of the British team for taekwondo, regional champion, etc. Enjoyed that. But in my town, maybe Mikey knows, but Slough had like the highest crime rate in the Western world per square foot.
Wow!
So there, that's how I came to fame. Right?
I thought it was because it was the original location of The Office.
Yeah, well, that's why they put it, I suppose. It would have been much more interesting if they got them to come inside. But so it was, everybody knew how to do something, right? Or should have, anyway. So I ended up getting into like far too many street competitions than I should have. I was from from 12 years old onwards, I was getting to some kind of stuff all the time, some kind of, violence. And then obviously I love Bruce Lee, just as everyone else did. I thought, right, this taekwondo stuff, my karate background is okay, but it's no good against multiple opponents because that's how it usually happened back in those days. And much older people, because you think you're the tough guy in like your middle school, but then you go to like secondary school and you're, 4 years younger than the real kind of men, right? So I realized that it wasn't enough. So and I had a really, really huge problem with a strong neo-Nazi contingent that was in my town, skinheads, bomber jackets, and everything. So I thought, right, let's do this. Let's learn some Wing Chun because that's what Bruce Lee did. And it just so happened, I was just walking down the street, literally the next day, and I know you remember this poster. There was a small black and white poster of Lung Ting kicking someone in the throat while gouging them in the eye at the same time. Right?
Yes.
And
the famous with Robert J, his former U.S. head guy. Yes.
Yeah, it was a black and white one. It says like learn to murder people now, something like this, right? I'm like, okay, cool. I would like to do that. So I rang the instructor and who became my Sifu Cliff Alderson, amazing guy. So he picks up the phone. Yes, who's this? Yeah, okay, be here in like 2 hours or something. So, running there trying to get to the class. And can't find his place. Finally found it. Lo and behold, it's a large skinhead with a bomber jacket and a huge scar. And I'm like, fuck, now I'm in trouble. But he was nothing like that. He was one of the most proper people I've ever met. And funnily enough, he lived in Germany because he was in special forces in Germany. So he originally learned directly off Grandmaster Koenigsberg back in the day.
Wow.
I ended up learning from him, Nick Smart, Master Milan. from the old Prime Wing Chun days.
Yeah,
'Cause
that's interesting. Yeah, for people who don't know, both Milan and Nick Smart were direct students of Sifu Leungteng and very early pioneers of bringing Wing Chun to the UK. And eventually they created, the Pro-Am Wing Chun Association, where they also did some sport fighting as well, like in the ring, and tough guys, really tough guys.
So many people are confused about basics in Wing Chun Chi Sao. Some view it as a collection of moves, and masters confuse their own students by talking of principles and concepts without telling them what's what. The 15 Chi Sao Fundamentals is my attempt at explaining Wing Chun Chi Sao from a perspective of principles, but also with the basic techniques required to express those principles. It shows the framework for Hong Kong Wing Chun Chi Sao, in particular, the training of Pun Sao and Lap Da. This is necessary training before going on to the higher and more spontaneous expressions of Chi Sao. Right now, if you use the code KFG Chi Sao, you can get a signed copy of my book for the price of the unsigned one. Click on the link in the description below and use the code KFG Chi Sao at checkout to get a signed copy of this full color, over 230-page manual on the vital foundational training exercise of Wing Chun. This offer is good while supplies last, so get yours today.
Yeah, it was super cool because I came on board just as that changeover from Leungteng organization when they left and made Pro-Am. So I saw a little bit of the old school and then transitioning onto there. Ended up becoming part of that fight team. I was competing a lot. I ended up getting my technician really, really quickly, like a couple of years, because I was training all the time. I just chucked taekwondo and everything. I was training like 6 days a week. My Sifu was so sick of seeing me. And I'm calling him all the time, like, Sifu, I had a thought about this and what about that? And because he was ex-army, he used to train us really hard, man. Like, it was an hour of like strength and conditioning before we done any training. He's like, yeah, this will make you really soft when you're doing your form. I'm like, this is making me really dead. So there was only like 4 of us in the class in the end because the sparring was like full power till people got knocked out and everything. It was crazy.
Right.
Then EWTO made a return into the UK, and that's when I met probably the same people as you met, Thomas Schruen, Hans Pirel, Heinrich Pfaff, all these guys. Was really wowed by them, and I thought, right, this is the way forward. Got to go from there. I went through the system, got my 4th under Grandmaster Kunschbeck. Also, then I think it was about 2006, something like this. I wasn't really that interested in other Wing Chuns, although I had friends who've been part of like Wong Chong Lung lineage and a few other ones. Like Wong Chong Lung is probably the other more known lineage in this area. So he's a cross trainer and everything. I was competing and doing stuff, and I spent like 3 years in and out of Copenhagen at Henning de Vern's place. So ended up doing their fight club, racked up 100 fights over there. The only non-DK guy to do it. So, I was really into that and the competition scene and everything. Then things went bad. Let's say management went bad in the UK for the EWTO or the NWTO as we were known. And then I thought, we'll just go on our own. Ended up meeting Emin Bostepi, and I was going to see him in his place in Kensington, doing privates and stuff like that. What a character he is. As you know, he's a character, right? And he's very good. I enjoyed my time training with him, but when the time came to, get off the pot, as it were, join EDMAS, I just felt like it was just another EWTO situation over there. And, who can fault him? That was a model that worked. It just wasn't where I was at.
Sure.
So that's when I went independent, done my own thing with my my younger kung fu brother and kind of my business partner. We opened our own organization, not trying to be like world beaters or anything. We just wanted to open a place that was ours and do things the way that we wanted to do it, absent any politics and all that kind of stuff. From there, I've been traveling already, but more to learn other martial arts and other things. I ended up training with all sorts of lineages, all over, wherever I could, around Europe first, and I was going back and forth from Asia. So I've got to experience many other styles of Wing Chun. And essentially what I did was, so I had a framework that I was working from. right? And then what tends to happen, I think, especially when people are searching all the time, is that do you remember when Fast and Furious came out? I don't know if this was a phenomenon that happened in the US, but in the UK, people would have these Citroen Saxos. Mikey will know, right? And they would just put like just to mod it up. They'll put like a Porsche spoiler on it and big fucking wheels and all this kind of stuff, right? Which individually those things are cool, but not on that car. Why is it there, right? And that's how I feel people operate when they do this in Wing Chun. I'll go to that lineage and I'll snatch that and I'll snatch this, but it doesn't work in a cohesive system, right? So, I just had these ideas and I thought, right, I can't just keep adding or doing. So I just smashed it to pieces, got the essence of it, and then built it all the way back up with all of these things. And then even if I'd gained particular skills or knowledge or attributes from other styles, if it didn't fit the system, it was an add-on that people could learn or I'd train if I was interested, but not if it couldn't fit into a cohesive system. And that's something I refined over time. And that system is built off biomechanics and strategies, tactics, techniques, most likely scenarios, but through the lens of Wing Chun. So it was important to me that I kept the essence of Wing Chun. I didn't violate its tenets, that I didn't, people throw a hook, right? And they'll see the hooking punch, right, from the BUG, but then people learn boxing because that hook is better, right? But I mean, for its purpose, for what it's used for, the boxing hook works just fine, but it's not how it works in Wing Chun, right? So they're like, okay, but I'll learn this because this is a more powerful hook. Yeah, the way that you use it, but that's not how it is in Wing Chun, right? And that's what people were doing, and I was very cognizant not to do that. Yeah. And then as I was going around and meeting other lineages, going to the mainland and Hong Kong, many of the ideas of the things I put together was so in line with what they were doing, right? So I knew I was like on the right track. And so yeah, that's how I built my method, I suppose, if you want to call it. And this has prompted many Sifus from many lineages and many organizations to come and train with me and learn a lot of the methods from me, because I'm not lineage specific, right? If it works, it works. There's objective measures to see how things work, not my Sifu says, I prefer, right? This is how the body works. This is strategy, tactics, and techniques behind it. Let's test it. And if it works, we keep it. If it doesn't work, we don't.
Excellent.
Or you adjust.
Excellent. So this fantastic book that you came out with here, what is what gave you the idea to write a book, and what was the main focus for people who haven't seen the book yet? What is this book really about compared to other Wing Chun books on the market?
So I train like a lot of martial arts. So I have and I'm competing, but was competing a lot at a relatively high level in those. But Wing Chun always held that very, very special place in my heart, and I felt I had something to offer because I have a unique background. First of all, having now I hate doing that. It sounds like I'm reeling off my list of things like a job application or something, right? I'm experienced with other martial arts, which gives me context to apply Wing Chun in various areas, right? And I could see this beloved martial art in that not just me, but my students, people like yourself, everybody loves, just getting worse and worse because there's all these different influences. First of all, those strange stories about where it came from, which led to then how it's trained, which then is led to how it's used, which then just detracts from it so much it's not the thing it originally was, and it doesn't work very well because of it. I thought, well, I've got two options then. I can either bitch about it or I could do something about it. So I chose to do something about it, and that's when this book, the idea for the book came about. It's a love letter to the martial art itself, and written for that 15-year-old kid, and however old you were, when you're like, man, I'm just desperate for the information. What could just tell me, like, I don't know about you, but I read on single combat, like every week so many times. Right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I read it before there was an English copy of it and before I could speak German. So I just had like a German dictionary and I'm like making notes trying to translate it on my own. It's a very fascinating book.
Yes. And I thought, and this was one of the best compliments I ever had was when I took it to Grandmaster Kernspect and he said, look, this is like the worthy successor to his book, right? And I almost cried. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe you just said that.
Right.
Because it's what I wanted. I wanted a book that inspired practitioners to love this. And do you remember back in the day when you done it and you thought, wow, this is the best thing I've ever done, and you would tell everybody about it and you would show them the book and you'd look at this video. And now it's like, don't look at the videos, don't read this book, because the videos is always a Wing Chun guy getting beaten up, and the book is ridiculously bad, AI generated junk, right?
Right.
And I thought, I want something that I want, my Kung Fu brothers and sisters to be proud of this martial art, because it is incredibly, incredibly functional. Like, I was involved in gang violence when I was younger. Then I became a doorman for over 10 years. Then I was competing at world class level in 7 different combat disciplines, 30 years. Studied sports science at university and Chinese medicine and so I've got very, very unique point of view on why this martial art is so good. I wouldn't invest my entire time doing this and refining it and teaching it if it was just a waste of time. But I can understand why people think it is, because 90% of Wing Chun out there is
bad.
Right?
Absolutely.
And it's of no fault of their own, right? They just are perpetuating what they've been taught. And if you're like 1 degree off from the beginning, then you're going to be all the way into the wilderness over there. So that was the purpose of the doctrine, starting from the history of what is this martial art, right? Understanding a little bit of context about Chinese martial arts and history, then like classifying Wing Chun, right? Like, so when people are turning around saying this is martial art for assassins, or it's internal, it's this, it's that, you're going to train it completely wrong, right? And then how are you going to be able to use it if you don't even know what it's for? So a lot of people say, yeah, Wing Chun, you can use it in the ring, right? It's not for that. I'm not saying that you couldn't. I'm not saying you can't use the ideas of it, but there's way better martial arts to do in combat sports than Wing Chun.
Absolutely.
Right? If you're boxing, do boxing. Can you do a pak sao? Can you do some sticking? Yeah. Should you do Wing Chun? No. Right? Martial arts tend to be formed from they're heavily influenced by the environment and the rule set. Yeah. So the environment and the rule set, as it were, like people that Wing Chun practitioners or people who've done Wing Chun were getting accosted by, were not going to give you Thai leg kicks, double leg takedowns, etc., etc. They'll fight you in a specific way for which Wing Chun worked perfectly well. Right? I mean, just look at it, head upright like this. If you start to hunker down and you get the shell, well, your peripheral vision is gone. You have tunnel vision. You're just looking at one person, right? Then how can it be a street fighting martial art or a self-defense? Because you can't see him there or him there. I mean, shit. The boxers sometimes can't see the hook coming because it goes into the blinds, where their own fist is obstructing their vision, right? So, your head is up, you're looking around, and then you can start to cross-reference with other martial arts that do that and see that this was something that was built for self-defense, not wartime. Because can you imagine just people doing, small little arrow steps, all the way to their enemy, then only to get killed. Yeah.
Right. Especially when they're going to assassinate those enemies with chain punches.
Breaking their neck was the best one. That was another theory as well. That's yeah. So you can see that's not for the battlefield either, right? Because again, worst martial art ever for the battlefield.
Right.
Yeah. And for a martial art that doesn't emphasize strength and conditioning, the first thing you emphasize as someone in the army is strength and conditioning. So how would you pick up if people who said this nonsense just picked up a sword or a spear or shield or wore any kind of armor or had to march for any kind of distance, they will quickly revise that statement, right?
Absolutely. One of the things that I think is really fantastic about your book here, and from as far as I can tell, you're one of the only people to have done it, at least in a Wing Chun book. And it is an idea that I hope to shamelessly steal at some points myself, is that you have at the end of various sections, you have little QR codes that people can scan in the book, which will take them to a video, whether sometimes that's an interview with someone that clarifies something that you wrote in the text, or in many cases, it's videos of actual demonstrations of the techniques that you show through pictures. Obviously, that's a huge benefit. Is that an idea you came up with? Did you see that done elsewhere? How did you come up with some of those design ideas?
Yeah, there's mine, TM, right? Yeah, it definitely, it was an idea that I came up with because I wanted it to be this kind of immersive experience. I could have made an ebook, but there's something about having the physical book, right? But you need those videos, and the videos were important, especially in the history section, because a lot of people make a lot of claims, right? And so I could put even a reference or whatever, but I wanted people, the readers, to hear it from the horse's mouth, right? Unedited videos, no leading questions, ask these the same questions over and over to every Sifu that I met, and bam, and that's how that's one of the methods, through triangulation, right? I get a bunch of information from interviews, and I then just find the common denominators and say, this is most likely what it is, right? And here's the interview to hear the other, the kind of peripheral aspects of what they're saying. Because the other thing is, I want to be challenged on any assertions I make in the book. Like, more often than not, I just present the information. It's very rarely I say, like, this is it, right? I'll say, this is the information. This is what I think, right? This is where the logically, this is where it leads me. That, at least in the history section, the videos were important for that. And I just wanted to give, like I said, the book that I would have wanted. Right?
Sure. Yeah, it gives the book a tremendous interactive feel, because that's always the challenge from the medium of books, where you see the photos or you see a technique series laid out, but to actually see what that looks like or what that training looks like, it's always a little different. So it's great to actually have that in there as well. Now, to actually backtrack to a point you made a few minutes ago, discussing what the purpose of a martial art like Wing Chun is when we compare it to other styles. What would you say is the soundbite if you wanted to tell someone, okay, this is what we do in Wing Chun, or this is what Wing Chun is for? Also, perhaps by implication, explaining what Wing Chun is not for. How would you define Wing Chun, especially in nowadays? What would you say? Okay, this is what we do in Wing Chun. This is what we can focus and train you on, to the exclusion of sport fighting and those other things. What would you say? What is that soundbite?
So martial arts can be put into four main categories. It could be performative, like wushu and like dance, whatever. Right? It could be military, which is its original definition, right? It could be sport, or it could be civilian self-defense, right? Obviously, this is not performative martial art. Anyone who's done Sunim Tao and fell asleep after the 10th time they've done it knows that, right? Yeah,
a surefire way to put an audience to sleep is, okay, let's do a Wing Chun demonstration and open with the Sunim Tao form.
Right. I was at the Feiloi Temple and I was told to do a demonstration next to Michael Tang of the Wing Chun lineage. So he's there doing this awesome form, and I'm just like thinking, this is shit, right? So I ended up starting to just mixing the wooden dummy and things like that, because it's not a very performative martial art.
Absolutely.
It's like we've said, it's clearly not sport fighting art, right? It's not for dueling. A lot of people talk about the BAMO, the rooftop, the Hong Kong rooftop fights, right? And it's like there were a bunch of disenfranchised kids beating the shit out of each other just to see who was better. There's no evidence that, okay, let's just say they did do Wing Chun. What did it look like? How was it? Were they throwing windmills? Was it just because the fitter guy, strong guy? We don't know what was going on over there. What we probably could say that it was mostly shit. Yeah, it was just clash, especially if there's two people that are arranged to meet at a time and place. There you go. So it's safe to say that Wing Chun isn't a dueling martial art. Also, because there was other martial arts for dueling at that time, right? And you can compare how good they were. So any conscientious person who was going to go into a duel, organized duel or a fight or combat would say, okay, after they got beaten up a couple of times, they would have gone, let's do Sandow, you know what I mean, or the equivalent at that time.
Sure.
Sport fighting is not what it is. Military, obviously not. Yeah. I mean, who's also heard of, like, unless you're the army of one, right? You know, it's just nonsensical. But just look how the military, one force attacks another. You can tell Wing Chun is not made for that. And it's not a martial art that derive from weapons. So I've done the Screamer since 2000, and then my Master Chief Tapin, he's a master of many other weapons, including old military, medieval type of weapons. You spend any amount of time in weapons, you quickly realize that Wing Chun's weapons are just an add-on. Yeah, some people are good enough and are smart enough to have really made them functional and like a proper weapons-based system, right? But if you look at it, it's just, okay, this is a time circle. I can do that with a knife. I can do this. I can do that. There's so many. It's just a very bad weapon. If it is a weapons-based martial art, it's a very bad one.
Yeah,
right?
that's been something that was bandied about for a really long time. Is even within the specific Yip Man Wing Chun circles that it's a weapons based martial art. Where unarmed fighting is derived from the weapons, and I was always like, wait a minute. Yip Man gave 2 interviews to New Martial Hero magazine, and in the second interview, he very clearly states that the Bacham Do techniques are derived from the fist fighting techniques. He says it plain as day. So, if someone is making that claim, it wasn't Yip Man, and I'm not saying the claim isn't true, but when we go to the guy who could tell us, he said no, that the knife fighting is derived from the fist fighting. And obviously, Loktim Punguan is an import from outside of Wing Chun because Loktim Punguan existed outside of Wing Chun and is available in other martial arts as well. So, yeah, I always found that a kind of bit of a very spurious claim that, like the Filipino martial arts, our unarmed fighting is derived from the weapons. And it's like you said, very clearly an add-on, very clearly something put on there later.
Yeah, look, I always say to people, right, very easy to test. If I pull out a knife, you will not extend your arms and come straight in. If I go to stab you, you'll move. If you suck, you'll try and smack the knife out of my hand. If you've got any kind of awareness and self-preservation, you'll move your body out of the way. Well, then you're constantly moving, you're offline, you're getting out of the line of power of a weapon. You are not running to your death. Yeah, you just... You know what I mean? When the way's clear, go forward, I'm dead, right? It's just, and why would you want to carry these heavy ass, if you're the assassin, right? Why would you want to carry these heavy ass knives under your sleeve anyway? Just carry a needle or a small knife if you've got to assassinate somebody. Whole thing. When you apply some logic to this, right, and then follow that logic and play it out, you realize that these claims are just silly, right?
Absolutely.
And for everyone, we've said this before, but don't fall for this. Oh, you don't understand the Chinese culture. The Chinese are not stupid. There is no Chinese physics. Yeah. Right. It's just how it works. Okay. So, and then that leaves what? Then it's civilian self-defense. You get accosted, someone grabs you, whatever, meant to be done very quickly, up and over. Hence the lack of emphasis on strength and conditioning and the like, because it's a martial art meant for very quick use, quick explosion of violence, and you're out. Yeah. And not necessarily to win, because the goal of a civilian self-defense isn't to win, it's to survive.
Absolutely.
Right. So if you're teaching your lady or your daughters or whatever, you don't care that she comes and says, yeah, this guy got me and I was able to, ground and pound him and everything else like this. You're like, I got away.
Yes.
Right. I done enough. I hit them and I went away. That's a win. Right. And that's essentially what Wing Chun is. I'm not saying that if you're skilled enough, if you're talking about us, we've kind of like overtrained Wing Chun, right? So we're probably going to kill the Hulk. Yeah, that's what we're training for, right? We're not just trained just to survive. But it's clearly a martial art. Like, if you look at the stories, we said this before, the stories don't have to be real to be true, right? But they're talking about this undersized person, dissuading the larger bully from continuing any kind of like further assault on them. That's essentially your goal. If you end up having, if you're able to take them out afterwards, good for you, right? So that changes how it should be trained, right? Like now these ideas of, okay, let's put some gloves on and get some sparring in. It's not that sparring is bad, but is that going to make you better at Wing Chun? There's better ways to train. There's better ways to develop your skill. Yeah. So if we circle back to the book, by knowing its history, we know why it was created, what its purpose for, civilian self-defense. If we know its purpose, now we know we can go next is to figure out the strategy, right? So if we have, what's the worst thought experiment? What's the worst kind of enemy? Because it's an enemy that we're fighting now. It's not an opponent. Yeah. What is the worst kind of enemy that you not want to meet, basically, if you're in a street situation?
Mm-hmm. The worst kind of enemy?
Yeah, like what's the attributes you don't want them to have?
Well, I wouldn't like this person to know anything I know, for one. Be doing the same style. But in general, yeah. Oh, sorry?
Physical attributes.
Oh, physical, yeah, bigger, stronger, more aggressive. Yeah, the kind of classic triad there.
Yeah, the heavier, the faster. That would suck too, right?
Yes.
So now we start to build our strategy off that. So if we have a human and they're like this, let's just say that squeezing my arms together, I'm way stronger doing this than I am opening my arms, right? So even though I want to attack the center line, it wouldn't really make too much sense for me to go in between like these goalposts, as it were, if someone was standing this way. So the first thing is I want to get off the line of my opponent if I can. These are ideals. So it's not that if you don't do this, Wing Chun doesn't work. These are the ideals, right? Also, aggression tends to manifest in a linear fashion. So people don't like run around, chase you in circles, right? They run at you if they're annoyed. Yeah. So by going off the line is a good start. The next thing is, how do I stop them using their leverage and their length and stop them from gaining momentum, right? I want to close the distance on them at this angle, right? So I don't want to approach them frontally. I want to get them at an angle. This is a good next step. The next step is, how do I get rid of their speed? Yeah. If I can attach onto them with friction, if I could put my arms in their arms, I can start to slow them down, right? And hopefully they haven't done any kind of sensitivity-based training. Yeah. So they will have more gross motions while I can come up with more appropriate responses. Then the next thing is like, what are the biggest parts of the enemy? What are the strongest parts of the enemy? Their legs, right? If I can somehow stop them from using that, i.e. by taking their route, yeah, so thereby only allowing them to like fire a cannon off a canoe, as it were. They can't really have that ground reaction force to exhibit their strength and their power. Mm-hmm. Then suddenly, see, I'm taking away their attributes just by the strategy. I haven't even done any technique yet, right? However you want to apply the technique, whatever. Yeah, we can come back to that. But this is how you get the existing technique you have and start to apply it. Once I'm able to do that, then it's high stress. If you're not highly trained, the chance of you getting an eyeball, getting a throat, getting specific targets are very low. So what to do? Let's attack their center line, because their cranial cordial axis, like all the way through their body, because that's where they're most dense. Why? Because if you try and slap a fly as it's flying around, nothing happens. But if it's against the wall and you slap it, it's dead. So if I hit you where you're most dense in the body, then most of my force can be, the impulse force, right, can be put into you. So you get the most damage.
Right.
And because of this cranial cordial axis, look at the size of it. So I can hit anywhere along there and elicit a particular response. And the response is either going to be biomechanical effect, i.e. you bend, you flop, you move, whatever, you tense up, or I cause some kind of damage like a laceration or a breakage. Yeah. Those are the two things that I want to cause by attacking continuously at your center line, right? And I want to do this and overwhelm. The two ways I'm going to finish this is if I hit you with enough concussive force that you're out, or I give you so much neurological overload that you cease to want to carry on fighting me. So in any army, because what I had to do is look outside of Wing Chun to understand Wing Chun. Funny how things work like that. So if you look at warfare, and you just reverse engineer it, because warfare you can use those ideas in single combat, right? Like you got the large force coming towards you, you don't meet it head on, you flank them.
Right.
Yeah. What do? They say that you attack the source of center, yeah? Source of strength, which is the center line in our case, would be attacking their general in their army, as it were, to make everything else scattered, to cause operational breakdown, right? That's what you want to do. You want to go there, attack the center line, because that attacks their balance, their respiratory system, and then their ability to do something back to you, right? And the most important thing, like a total victory in war, is when you take someone's will. Yeah. So if you can break someone's arm, leg, and punch them in the eye, and they'll be annoyed enough to carry on fighting. But if you can take their will, it's done. So this is the broad strategy, and I call it. I want to compress, control, and overwhelm. Yeah.
So what if you could transport back in time for a front row seat into the life and legacy of one of the most respected Wing Chun masters in history? Gong Sao Wong, a tribute, direct students on Sifu Wong Leung, offers you just that. Through a series of exclusive conversations, 25 direct students share anecdotes, reflections, and personal stories offering in-depth understanding of the man behind the legend. Order your copy today across 12 Amazon marketplaces with free shipping. I absolutely love this book, and I think you'll find it an indispensable part of your collection. I can't recommend it enough. Get yours today. Go to Amazon, type in Gong Sao Wong, and there you go.
Awesome. That's fantastic. And you explain that in the book as well, if I recall. You also not only discuss the kind of more classic theories within Wing Chun, but you also do a couple things in a little bit more depth, talking about some of the anti-grappling ideas. As much as I hate kind of buzzwords like that, like, when we're dealing with someone who's trying to grab us as opposed to someone who's trying to fire a punch or kick at us, you have some really good ideas explained very well in terms of balance, stability, and movement. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that. Wing Chun handling more kind of grabbing based attacks. Maybe how does the strategy differ? Is it the same? How is it applied in those situations?
Sure. So one thing that we need to know is that Wing Chun isn't. So you'll see a lot online. People do the Chiu-A meetups, and they talk about this, and they try and, because they don't understand the system enough, they borrow from other places, right? And they do what I call Franken-Chun. Yeah, so you see this, Thai boxing pummeling and wrestling pummeling, and they say, yeah, that's just like Chiu-A. No, it's not. It's different mechanics, different technique, different outcome, right? You want totally different outcome from what you're doing. So in Wing Chun, you don't grapple back. There isn't a counter grapple, right? I don't want to get into this situation where, if I tense my fist real hard, it will start to irradiate up the body, right? And it'll cause density in the body. Therefore, you can start to pull and push my center everywhere. Well, that's what's going to happen if you start getting into a grapple fest with somebody. Also, why not just hit them? Yeah, or control your space, govern your space. If you really want to learn how to grapple somebody, better do Greco-Roman or something, right? And and I'm not saying that because a lot of people say that back in the day, oh, you don't need to grapple, but they were for people who couldn't grapple, right? But I mean, I've got a black belt in BJJ and Sambo, and I compete a lot, so I know how to grapple. And I'm telling you, don't grapple. Yeah,
right.
If you do ring, right? So It's not built for that at all. Yeah, none of the motions are built for that. Of course, there's the odd, you can lapse out and move some people around, and maybe grab a piece of clothing and move them around. But it's not this kind of exchange of grappling. So the idea is where I want to. The minute that I'm touched, I'm already trying to move my position, make sure that you can't take my balance and I can take yours, and to hit you straight away, right? And not get embroiled in a grapple fest, which is you see a lot of. You even see what people do Chiu, they get to here, then they'll do this kind of stuff, and they'll do this. It's like, what? Why don't you just, you just hit them from a better position? They won't do it because they're too afraid. They don't know what to do, right? And the worst is, right, see, I'm like an old man just complaining about kids doing their things, and they'll start doing Chiu and then grab each other's wrists. I'm like, shit. Nobody should be able to grab wrists. This is like the number one thing Wing Chun trains against, because the minute that you compress the range on somebody, right, and you hit them a couple of times, they will close their eyes and grip at something, and either going to grab your clothes or grab your wrists. Our martial forefathers knew this, and they came up with ways to take the grab off and continue hitting. And if people cannot do that nowadays, they're not doing the basics of Wing Chun. Right. So when you see this and they're grabbing, the guy can't let him go and everything, the guy can't get him off, it's time to reevaluate what it is that you're doing and why you're doing it.
Sure. Yeah, that's interesting. I have, that's one of the things that I prioritize, especially in my beginner training, which is, okay, you're going to go in, you're going to try to, use these punches to stop the guy so you can either escape or cause enough damage that this guy doesn't want to continue. But what are the kind of things that happen? Well, the guy gets hit a couple times and tries to grab your arms. Exactly what you described. This is what I consider basic training, not 50 different defenses against Pak Sao and Lap Sao for a beginner, because that's not necessarily the situation they're confronted with. And yeah, in Wing Chun, we have all these different ways of, either preventing the grip or dealing with it once it happens. And I always found like it's nice to hear that coming from other instructors, because like these are the things that I've seen as major problems, and prioritizing the kind of things that happen to Wing Chun people, especially as they're beginners with not a lot of Chi Sao or not a lot of backup skills. They need to have solid technical responses against these kind of things. And part of it is because I have videos, as I'm sure, you're a Wing Chun person of note, and I'm sure people, when they find videos, they send you all sorts of videos and, hey, check this out. And I have a video of someone who, proclaims himself some kind of grandmaster. And there's a video of him doing Chi Sao, and the student that he's doing it with is just grabbing his wrists in the middle of Pun Sao, maybe not even because that's what they're doing. Almost they want to see what the other guy does. And you see he's like, suddenly it's almost like, hey man, you're screwing up with my story here, bro. And I'm going like, well, I mean, it's not good Wing Chun to just grab someone's wrists, but you should know how to deal with that, because people are going to do it. And seeing this guy who had been doing Wing Chun since before I was even born struggle as if like this is something that he had never seen before, and I go like, this is kind of day one stuff that you should be addressing. I'm don't know where I'm going with that, but I definitely see that is an issue, and making sure that students are equipped against these kind of things, it should be paramount. But there's a lot of Pak Sao combination number 6 and Pak to Lap and all this kind of crazy looking stuff, and I'm going, where's this situation ever occurring, right?
Yeah, I mean, they're good just to learn your space, right? Because you need your time, your space, and your force. You need to know this kind of like 4-dimensional area that you're operating in. So learning these kind of like set rope combinations are good for that, right? If someone comes in and they give you a hook and you do the classic like tanda, right? I mean, likelihood is they're probably going to hit you with the other arm. Yeah, if you've killed this arm or something, yeah, hit you with that leg. So just to teach you that these are like the likely things that happen. But then after that, the training has to move to more improvisation as soon as possible. Once the mechanics are learned, you gotta migrate over to this more where you're improvising based on the mechanics and the strategy, tactics, and the tenets, the rules, as it were, of Wing Chun. And you can't really go that wrong then. So this is what I speak about a lot in the book, because what I'd done was I went to all the established lineages and saw how they operated. Yeah, and it's funny, the more under pressure they got, the more they all started looking the same. Although the mechanics may be a little bit different, but fighting's fighting, man. The things that work. Right. And they could, like I said, they could have their own mechanics to do their own flavor and everything. But by and large, if there was a fly here, you would do that. If it was there, you would do that. If someone tried to grab your pocket, you would do this. You're doing, packs out. You're doing this. This is how you occupy space, right? It's, and then obviously you just, it's built on those kind of very innate ways of moving. So yeah, that's how I the progression I made in the book. You got the history, which allowed me to know its purpose, civilian self-defense, which then goes on to the strategies, the tactics. So the overall strategy is this: shock, compress, control, overwhelm. The tactics are, attack the center line, control the zones or the gates, as people like to call them, etc. Continuous attacks. Yeah, and then the techniques are the ones that are born from that, right?
Yeah.
And that's just how. And then that's the same kind of framework you could use for every Wing Chun, no matter what lineage. And then you could build your teaching process and your training process from that. So I'm glad to see more Wing Chun people are investing in time in developing their attributes. They're doing some calisthenics or some kettlebells or, all this kind of stuff, right? A bit of running, but hitting the pads and stuff. But still, because of where they started, they're not doing things specific for the art. So I'm sure you've done it. You get the round on, hit the bag for 3 minutes,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
But why 3 minutes? Why not 5?
Right.
Why not 10? Right? Why not 1? Yeah. You are getting fitter. You are getting stronger. And then, okay, so then we're doing that, and then you do whatever push-ups, have many push-ups, or do some squats or whatever. Like, but why? Why is it that you're doing that exercise? For what reason? What is it to get stronger? What do you mean by stronger, and for what?
Right.
If you can deadlift 200 kilo, how does that translate? Like, when are you ever going to lift 200 kilo in what you're doing? And when is anybody ever going to lift 200 kilo?
Right. Right.
Right. In that manner, for what? Then, when are you ever going to hit somebody for 3 minutes? If you're hitting somebody for 3 minutes, you've done something wrong 2 minutes, 50 seconds ago.
Of course. Yes,
Right?
absolutely.
So, isn't it a wonder why people find it difficult to use their Wing Chun? Because none of their training supports this skill set.
Right.
So, let's run it through. What do I mean by that? So, most street fights, street confrontations, they last 3 to 10 seconds.
Right.
So that is a drastically different energy. This is the ATP PC system, right? Drastically different energy usage than if you're to do 3 minutes. In fact, my goal when I'm training people for real world violence is to do 3 minutes work in that 10 seconds. If I can train your nervous system, your energy system to go balls out for 10 seconds, I guarantee you, even if that guy's a decent boxer and he could jab the shit out of you for 3 minutes, you can overwhelm him in 10 seconds. If you shock, compress, control, or overwhelm him.
Sure.
Right? Even though he's fit, it's like he's a long distance runner, but you're sprinting and you're only doing a 100-meter race. You're going to beat him,
right?
Because you've been sprinting and he's been jogging, right? Of course, if he can drag it out longer, if the fight lasts, so this is the stats off the top of my head: 3 to 10 seconds is a general street confrontation. Anything above that lasts 60 seconds. Anything above that lasts 10 minutes.
Wow.
Yeah. So you can see you're cycling through the different energy systems, right? Wing Chun is not built for the 10-minute fight,
right? Because
invariably you're going to be grappling. Then there'll be some running. There'll be the good old schoolboy headlock.
Sure.
So it's definitely not that. The 60-second one, you're into duel territory. Yeah. You've hit each other. There's been a break. You stand there calling each other's mothers funny names, and then you just go back in and go.
Right.
It's like this. We know Wing Chun is this. It's gone. The decision's made. You compress the ranges and you cycle through, destroying your center line, taking them out or not, or just getting away. Dunzo. So all training and all drills should be based around that. Not saying that you can't spar for 3 because you get other attributes. Let's say you don't beat the person in 10 seconds, then you are in a duel. So you should know how to do that because it gives you a bit of confidence, right?
Right. And have some recovery cardio and that kind of stuff if you blast out your anaerobic load, right? But yeah, no, it totally makes sense. Absolutely.
Right. So, you do drills like, if we take it to like the basic version, like army mill, you'll get more from 30-second army milling than you would from all the drills that most people do. You just go there, 2 head guards on, 2 gloves on, not allowed to block, go. Just fucking throw for 30 seconds, right? The aggression, the fitness required, everything is much more akin to an actual street confrontation. Right? And then I've got ways where I've refined that we can actually start to use your skills within that time. And then I make my drills down to 10 seconds. It's just like explosion of action for 10 seconds, then rest. Explosion of action, then rest. And I do the same for these bag work drills, which I can give you for your members.
I would love that. That'd be great. That's fantastic. Awesome. Hey, I think this is a great play. Although I could definitely have this conversation and go on and on and on. We have the same deal like with Jesper, where it's just about turning the off button at some point, because we would just go on and on and on and on. But we'll definitely have you back. I look forward to meeting you again face to face at some point in the future, which would be absolutely great. And in the meantime, before we're out of here, could you just let people know where they could get a hold of you if they want to do some training with you, and where they could potentially get a copy of this fantastic book?
Thank you. Yeah. So I will say this, that if you want to get more historically up-to-date information in real time and go to China and meet the masters, go to contact Jesper and Joyce. I'm sure you can put their details down on there. I have to give them that shout out.
Yes.
Go Sifu, who recently passed away. He was a treasure in the Wing Chun world. Jesper and Go Sifu's son are going to be sharing his father's art now in Europe. So again, contact me or him in order to see opportunities to get that Wing Chun style is amazing. I mean, I play homage to it by doing their particular ready position on the cover there, right? Because it's amazing system. But yeah, meet them for any kind of historical stuff. For the book, Doctrine of Wing Chun / by now, I think I'll give you.
Okay, we'll put it in the description below.
Yeah, and I'll give you the links where. But anyone can contact me on Facebook. And unlike certain other people, I am totally happy with people critiquing what I've said and what I've written, as long as they're well intentioned. Number one, because the intention is to come to a greater truth, not just to prove who's right and who's wrong. Number one. Number two, if I put something out in a particular way, like with references, with examples, whatever, right? You have to come back to me with the same, not just my dad told me this. Right. Then it's not going to be a productive conversation. Otherwise, yeah, challenge me on everything. I welcome it.
Awesome. Well, with that, thank you so much. Look forward to seeing you again, and we'll see you next time. All right, peeps, I hope you enjoyed that episode of The Kung Fu Genius. As always, don't forget to subscribe to The Kung Fu Genius, hit that bell for notifications, support us on Patreon or YouTube to get extra content. And as always, I'll see you guys next time.
Word is I'm a kung fu genius. Technique speaks for me, not lineage. Forget Jet Li, cause I'm the one. Many call me Sifu, but to you I'm Si-Kung. And I produce masters. You surpassed us. Your kung fu stiffer than corpse and caskets. City Wing Chun is the house I built. Violate the gate and your blood gets spilt. Alex, Richter, always the victor.
Your camera is turned.
That's okay. That happens every now and again.
Okay,
I have a secondary camera that's recording me here, so this camera is really just for you, and it shuts off randomly, but I still see you. Everything's good.
Yeah,
All right.
You don't need to see his face the whole time anyway. I see it enough as it is.
Where are you going to be?
I'll be in LA. I'm teaching at UCL and then somewhere else.
Oh, LA. All right. Sorry to hear that.
Condolences.
My condolences. We're from New York, so we hear like, LA. All right. All right, everyone. I hope you enjoyed that episode of The Kung Fu Genius. As always, don't forget to subscribe to The Kung Fu Genius. Hit that bell for notifications. Let me know if you like this kind of comment. All right, one more time.